Okay, so some pretty big news went down yesterday. Y'all already know what I'm talking about. It's the James Harden trade. But what does this 4-team deal actually mean for each organization? So before I get into this, I want to ask you guys to subscribe to this channel. Thank you for the support so far, it really means a lot. And watch out for a video coming out in the very near future about a possible Isaiah Thomas return. Alright, so I'm in a different room today because I'm traveling, but I had to get this video out because the James Harden saga in Houston is officially over. And it's safe to say that the Rockets locker room will not miss him. However, the Nets, who have been without Kyrie Irving, have now acquired one of the best scorers in basketball history. And with that acquisition, the Nets now have 3 of the top 10 scorers in the NBA this year. But let's unpack the actual details of this trade, because the shockwaves of this blockbuster deal will obviously be felt beyond the confines of Brooklyn. For the Nets, it's simple. They get James Harden, the Rockets end up with Victor Oladipo, Dante Exum, and Rodions Kuruc, and 4 total first-round picks that include pick swaps. Talk about a haul. The Pacers get maybe the best off-the-bench spark plug scorer in Caris LeVert, and the Cavs receive Jared Allen and Taurean Prince. So let's talk about the Nets first, because if they weren't already, they're definitely the clear-cut, most talented and loaded team in the East. And on paper, and I want to stress that, like in theory, they might even be the best team in the entire league. And obviously the Lakers, they got deeper, they got the best duo in LeBron and AD, but Brooklyn's got this trio now that just sounds like a 2K team. Like if you told me in 2015 that James Harden, Kyrie, and KD would be on the same team, I'll tell you you're crazy. But here we are, and they have a really cool thing cooking right now. But I gotta be honest, I have my concerns. First of all, defensively, the Nets are not a great team. And you basically replace Jared Allen with James Harden, and yeah, you lose Caris LeVert too, who might not be the best defensive player, but he's another young guy with quick feet you can throw at the other team. They don't have those things anymore. They got James Harden. I don't know if this problem's gonna be solved. You know, the last thing that they want to do is become the Wizards, being like a top 3, top 2 offensive team in the league, but being on the bottom in the league in terms of defensive efficiency. Like, that is not conducive to winning basketball. We've seen that in the past. For the Nets, they don't really care how many, games they win in the regular season. Like, they have to win the playoffs, and not being able to play defense is not going to do them well in the playoffs. So, maybe even bigger of a concern than that is just the chemistry, which is another playoff concern. You know, people think that chemistry doesn't matter, that's just about having the most talented team. Just look at the Miami Heat last year. That's a team that knew each other's weaknesses and strengths, and that's how they won. I mean, they really were a conducive, they all fit each other. I don't know if the Harden Kyrie thing is gonna work. I don't want to make this like a Harden bash segment, but let's call a spade a spade. Nobody's really liked playing with Harden in the past 5 years. Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook, these are guys that Harden handpicked to play with. These aren't people that he was forced to play with. And both of those relationships dissolved very quickly, at least on the court. I don't know if Kyrie is the kind of person that's gonna be able to sacrifice and be happy with James Harden. I know, because the truth of the matter is that Harden and KD have the off-court friendship, not Harden and Kyrie. I don't know if Kyrie being all woke and intelligent, burning sage in TD Garden to make it more peaceful, is gonna go along with strip club regular James Harden. But we'll see. We'll see how it works out. Steve Nash is an ex-player. I think he has the ability to kind of do away with any conflicts in the locker room, but do I trust Steve Nash and Mike D'Antoni to come up with a defensive scheme that's going to solve their problems? It's definitely going to be a rocky road ahead, and I hope the best for them. Even as a Celtics fan, I want this thing to reach its full potential. Now, the Rockets. Oladipo for Caris LeVert, it might be the most sneaky win in this entire thing, just because, in my opinion, Oladipo is just a much more complete player than LeVert. LeVert is a great off-the-bench guy. He can really score the ball, but Oladipo's shown in the past he can be a literal all-star, and he's coming off this gruesome injury, and he's shown at least this year that he has his legs underneath him. Does he fit with what Indiana's trying to do? So it's Sabonis' team now, we all see that, and Malcolm Brogdon's playing pretty well. I don't know if Oladipo wanted out. I don't know what the details of that whole entire situation was. All I know is that if you're the Rockets and you had to give up a second-round pick and LeVert to get Oladipo, you're going to do it any day that ends with Y. So they come out with a pretty big win right there. But let's be honest, it's not even about Oladipo per se. It's not about the other 2 players who, I don't want to disrespect them, but they might not even be on the roster in one calendar year. It's about the picks. This this haul of 4 picks and 4 pick swaps is the most significant like drafts asset that we've seen come through in a trade since the Brooklyn Nets gave up all that for what the Celtics gave them in 2012. You know, the Rockets will benefit off this trade for a very, very long time. And whoever they end up drafting in with these picks will be remembered in history because of how lopsided this trade was, in my opinion. And the Rockets really came away with a lot here, especially for a guy that didn't even want to be there in James Harden. So they did pretty well for themselves. I want to move on to the Pacers because I just talked about Oladipo and his situation there. LeVert, I think this was kind of a move because of the TJ Warren injury. That's why you bring in LeVert as a pure scorer. But I don't know if LeVert's the kind of guy you can put into a starting lineup and he coexists with the rest of the starters. He doesn't hinder what they're trying to do because he needs the ball in his hands to really be effective. He kind of reminds me of Lou Williams, that you bring him in the second unit, he has the ball, he's basically the leader of that second unit, and that works. He plays really well against other bench players on the other team. I think that's LeVert's role. I don't know if LeVert's a starting kind of guy. When he did start in Brooklyn, it was because of injuries. I think he's a great young talent. I think he can develop into a guy like that, but he just hasn't shown me the playmaking skills, the ability to be malleable, to fit into a system and not just be the second unit scorer guy. We'll see. We'll see what happens with that. Again, I don't know if Oladipo wanted out. He seems like a very unselfish player. I don't want to put that upon him. But that's really the only way that this kind of makes sense, is that he wasn't okay with it being Sabonis' team. Now, the Cavs are they're like the sneaky little brother of this trade, but them getting Jarrett Allen for this first round pick, and of course Taurean Prince, who's a solid player, but people don't realize this pick was actually Milwaukee's pick. The Cavs got this pick in a trade. This is not going to be a great pick. This is not going to be a lottery pick. And if you're telling me that you had to give up the 28th or 26th pick in the draft for Jarrett Allen, who might be one of the best defensive young talents in the entire league, I'm going to do that. I'm going to take that to the bank. And I think it was Larry Nance who jokingly tweeted that Sexland is now surrounded by trees. It is true. The Cavs have 6 centers on roster. They're going to have to make some moves. Probably going to be JaVale McGee, maybe even Andre Drummond if they can find a team willing to take on his contract. But I think Jarrett Allen is going to be a part of the Cavs' plan for a really long time. The fact that he is young, the fact that he is so talented defensively, you don't block LeBron like that unless you are talented, not only physically, but mentally. He has a great feel for the game, plays great team defense. I think is exactly what the Cavs need. I think they come away as another winner of this whole big fiasco. So, this trade, either way, it's going to be looked at heavily in the future, just due to what could possibly happen with the Nets this year and who the Rockets might draft with those picks. But as somebody whose team wasn't affected by this at all, I'm just excited to see how it's all going to shake out. What do y'all think? What are the Nets going to be? What are the Rockets going to be? Let me know in the comments, and I'll catch you next time.